Africa's gift to its tribe. Homegrown radio. Ekaya. My home.
For me to show the reason why the blockchain technology and the protocol is very important. And I think what they were trying to achieve back then is what's important for me, you know, when we talk about protocol, right? To have a decentralized system where you can reduce cost.
Welcome to it. I'm Desiree, and today Learn Crypto 01 has brought you a very special guest, Shabs. Shabs, how are you?
I'm all good.
Shabs, we are discussing all things cryptocurrency, all things blockchain technology. We're in the bottom of the continent, Africa, South Africa to be specific. And we as crypto curious are here talking about the blockchain technology, which is for many blockchain enthusiasts is no longer a new phenomenon, but many people, being 2023, have now started actually looking into this technology and saying, what is it? How can we as a company or as an individual come through and say, I'm also involved in this technology? We are hosted by Homegrown Radio. We are Learn Crypto Africa, and we are very excited to be having this session today where we're talking blockchain technology. Shabs, let's get into it. When I met you back, I think in 2009, if my memory serves me right, you are the guy that said to me, I do blockchain. And at the time, I'm like, what is blockchain? Yeah. And you kept going on. No matter what we spoke about, you kept taking me back to blockchain. At the time, it was a distant mystery for me, and here we are how many years later, and we are talking blockchain as the big buzzword. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Talk to us about your journey in the blockchain technology.
Awesome. First of all, thank you for hosting me. It's been many years since we actually met and we actually started this journey, and I can clearly remember our first conversations and you know, how enthusiastic I was about this technology, you know. So my journey kind of goes back to starting a startup in the rewards marketing space.
When did you first hear about blockchain?
So I first heard about blockchain through some entrepreneurs in Pretoria that were playing around with that technology. Obviously, being part of a loyalty rewards startup, they were looking to integrate blockchain technology to loyalty rewards solutions, and that's where I first heard about it. And from there on, I got a little bit interested. I became part of the IBM Global Entrepreneurship Program, which literally just, you know, gave me that opportunity to dive deep into the blockchain space and solutions. And that's pretty much where I come from. And this is like 2014, 2015, when I'm now going through the process of like deep learning. You know.
Did you have any inkling in your head about how big it would be and how its birth child, Bitcoin as a currency, would just evolve?
No, I didn't.
You had no clue. I don't even remember you talking about Bitcoin to me at the time.
Yeah, I didn't have a clue, but the one thing that I did focus on very early on in my journey was use cases. Right. I never just wanted to focus on the transactional aspect, talking about investment and Bitcoin and what that could do for one's individual journey when it comes to making money. But I wanted to focus on the use case. What exactly is Bitcoin trying to do?
At that time, what use case were you thinking about? And is that use case still relevant now?
Look, I was studying Bitcoin, and that's where the underlying technology that powered it came in. Back then, the remittance space was exactly where I was looking at, but all in all, I think that industry has developed into an amazing
The
industry.
Bitcoin, the currency.
Remittance, but also from an investment perspective, Bitcoin has just done over and above what anybody ever expected. So
Right.
if you invested back then, it would have been
I know,
one of
right?
the best investments. Yeah.
And what makes Bitcoin a sort of the attractive point or the attractive currency is its protocol, which back in 2009 was signed and sealed and put onto a ledger by the great Satoshi Nakamoto, who's become a mysterious entity.
Yeah.
It was the protocol. And what do you still feel about that protocol now, especially in the light of all these other altcoins that have come into light? What do you think about that protocol right now?
So I think that Bitcoin set the base, to be honest, and that protocol now is what is used to be able to differentiate and build different varieties of protocol or systems. When you talk about these protocols and you talk about the altcoins, you have to remember that the one place where you start from is the Bitcoin and what that was supposed to do, right? I think for me, and again, I'll come back to a couple of simple concepts in order for me to show the reason why the blockchain technology and the protocol is very important. And I think what they were trying to achieve back then is what's important for me, you know, when we talk about protocol, right? To have a decentralized system where you can reduce cost, where you can be able to do peer-to-peer sort of payments, where you can have trust that is not centralized to any government, that is not centralized to a private system. I think those are the critical sort of elements that one should think of, you know, when you're looking at what these systems are supposed to do, right? So going forward, altcoins, I honestly believe that we have seen so many different variations, some good, some bad. And now we talk about the things like your computing power, your costs, and so on. So in terms of protocols, I think those are integral to the system.
Right.
But the use case for me is always where I land up.
Absolutely.
The use case is what will determine whether an altcoin is going to go further than, you know, one is expecting, or where, you know, it's just going to be another fade that everybody's talking about.
I love the fact that Bitcoin just opened a gateway for so many other opportunities within the blockchain space. But when I look back at the fact that it's a retaliation project, which is Bitcoin, a retaliation project to the global fall of the markets back in 2008, it was more of a political retaliation to the status quo, which says that centralization and banks and big corporates, they've come to own so much of our pockets, and they decide when and how we actually own what we generate. And if they decide to make it all crash, they can do that. So that retaliation project was meant to put power back into our pockets.
Yeah.
What do you feel? What do you think has happened since then? Do you feel like that has come to play, or with all the bulls and the bear markets that it has fallen flat in its face?
Look, I do think that it has made an impact. And if you want to look back, Bitcoin is what? Maybe 12 years old now?
Oh,
you know? So it's been some time.
It
right?
really only started taking off around about 2011, right?
Yeah. You know, so from the inception of the project to where we are now, right? It's taken some time, right?
Yes.
So we haven't quite gotten into the mainstream as of yet. I do believe there's a lot of hype when it comes to crypto investment, and Bitcoin being the first and being a solid investment when it comes to crypto. That has worked out pretty well. It has worked out pretty well. But one of the things that we are still seeing when it comes back to the banking system, regulations and finance, is that it hasn't really changed, right? It hasn't really changed when we talk about how the bankers are still being bailed out, and how they still are making the sort of decisions that they made independently, good or bad, right? They're still doing that, right? It's kind of like...
well, you can admit as well that there's no moral conviction from their end to actually go digital assets. Digital assets are counterposing what they are doing. So if we're talking decentralization, power to the people, economic power to the people, or financial power to the people, versus centralization, which says a few of us still own all the control. So there isn't really a conviction to move fast, going towards blockchain technologies, going into digital assets for the banks. So yes, the fight is still at its early phases, or it's at its infant stages. And until you get a critical mass of the people that are opposing the centralization of their finances, then only will you be able to see this mass sort of improvement, adoption. So adoption is a big deal for us as crypto enthusiasts, because until that adoption is really, really taking place, we're not going to see the full value of cryptocurrency benefits, the full value of the blockchain technology. Because in as much as you've got the cryptocurrencies, which is the buzzword around blockchain, the real thing for me is adoption of blockchain technology, which gives systems a decentralized way of doing things. So for example, we spoke about supply chain management the other day. In mining, how do you think that mining, can you just imagine how mining would evolve in Africa if the blockchain was adopted?
No, absolutely. I do think when we talk blockchain, and when just coming back to mention of finance, when you're looking at how these different institutions are evolving, they do have projects of their own that make business sense to them, right? To be able to integrate blockchain technology, also digital assets. So they do have their own little sandbox that they are working in. And they're not totally averse to, dealing with the blockchain technology. What we find is that there's going to have to be some level of collaborations between what startups want to see, so a completely decentralized solution.
To be forced, though.
I don't know if it's going to be forced, because they're in a power position, right? So your financial systems are in a power position. So I don't think you can force them. I read a while back somebody describing the relationship between a startup and a bank, and they said, this individual goes to a bank and he says, well, I'm a tech startup, I use blockchain solution, and look, I can save you money doing ABCD. To this executive, and this executive responds and he says, okay, cool, I'll see you next year when you've implemented your technology. So a year later he comes back, hey, listen, I've implemented my technology, so would you be interested to take up my technology within your organization? And again, it's like, well, you don't have critical mass yet. Go and get critical mass, and then we'll talk. It goes back. And eventually 5-10 years goes by, and this little startup now is like progressing nicely, and they've got everything that was needed from a banking solution. So now imagine the old guard is out, and the new incumbent comes in and he says, well, that's an amazing technology. This company, the startup that has been struggling to build itself for the past 5 to 10 years is actually what we need. So what do they do in collaboration? Hey, listen, we'd like to buy you out, right? So typically that's what happens, right? And it's not the only way it can happen.
Or we buy you out and kill the project.
We can buy you out and kill the project, or start our own project. But there's different ways for it to happen. But I think what I must stress here is that when you look at startups and big organizations, it's typically going to take a collaborative sort of approach before we see, the sort of adoption that we want to see. I think that's one of the best ways that we can go about this.
I like how optimistic you are when it comes to corporates and government. I'm a bit more of a, skeptic, mainly because I truly believe the whole move towards decentralization is a great one, because if there's one thing that we're going to use as a tool to bridge the poverty divide, especially in Africa, is to decentralize things. Now, one of the biggest challenges is getting the knowledge and information out there to the masses, right from the person who is knowledgeable to the least knowledgeable person. And that is the reason that we started a company called Learn Crypto Africa. And I'm sure there's many other similar startups that will pop up around the continent, and which is to educate people at the bare minimum about what this thing is, digital assets, what it is. I mean, even universities have had to adapt to this and actually put together courses that teach people, but not everybody ends up in university. So we thought, let's put together programs so that people understand, at least get all the material in one place, so that people understand what we are dealing with when we're talking about digital assets. Now, back to our continent, Africa. How are we going to make sure that we are not left out? My worry is that we end up being the consumers versus the creators of emerging tech. How are we going to bridge this?
So I'm going to go back a little bit. Usually when somebody asks me, what do you do? I like to say that I'm a creative, right? And I have a background in entrepreneurship, and I've worked with blockchain solutions. I think that gives the person an idea of, my mental state, right? So I look for ways and opportunities to be able to make effective or impact effectively and grow certain businesses or business opportunities, right? So the creative element of who I am, utilizing this technology to make an impact, right, is where we're going to see Africa participating meaningfully and being able to, be part of this revolution, right? I truly believe the way for us to be able to participate is for us to be creative, right? It's very important that we know what we're playing with, so we know the technology, and hence, what we're doing right now and what you're doing is amazing. I think there's a lot of people that can learn from this and can have access to this knowledge, so it's a building block. Right? It's a building block. So there's creativity, there's knowledge, and then there's impact. Right? So I totally do feel that Africa can play a part in this.
And especially since we have such a young population.
Oh, yeah.
That is also techie savvy.
Absolutely.
We don't have that many industries. We don't have a large manufacturing playground in this continent. Lots of our things are manufactured outside and brought into the continent, even though the raw materials are extracted from here. But with a place that does not have industry, you end up with a very low employment rate.
Yeah.
And with that, obviously, comes all the things, the ripple effects of high unemployment. So I think that the blockchain space, it would give us an opportunity to somewhat play in there. Of course, there's the advent of open AI now, and everything is turning to going into the AI space.
Yeah.
Those are all the areas that we could play in, but we got to get in early. You know, when the Internet of Things started, when Web 1, Web 2 came into play, we were pretty much last adoption. We bought all the gadgets. We were the consumers but not the developers within that space, and we only went in really late. How can we make sure that we're not getting in too late with emerging tech?
Yeah, I think, again, you know, education is foundational to this. One needs to know what's out there in order for you to use those tools enable to, and I think this is my second point, to impact either your community or the world around you, and that's through problem solving, right? You've got to tackle real issues that is happening around in order for you to be able to make that impact. You mentioned some of the problems that we have. So, for example, manufacturing in Africa, you know, I do believe within that lies the solution, right? So how do we tackle the problem that we have, so let's say manufacturing, using technology for us to be able to go forward? Because it's not impossible for us to be able to participate in the manufacturing space, right? The problem is, how do we do that? Is this a real need? One, is this something that can help us too? And then what tools do we use to be able to effectively solve the solution? You know, so it comes back again, like use case. Right. It's so important for us to understand what it is that we're trying to solve for. You know, and maybe that's where you come back all the way back to the drawing board and saying, okay, so what's a decentralized system trying to do? What are we trying to do? What's the biggest problem that we have in Africa? You know, and how can we use this technology to be able to impact?
We can list a whole lot: data connectivity, energy supply, sufficient water, clean water. There's so many things that we can think about that creates part of Africa's problems. But another thing would be, what are the intents of the corporates? What are the intents of the big giants that hold the economy of Africa? Because we don't hold our own economy. It's people outside of the continent that decide on the fate of Africa's economy. Well, what will have to happen?
If I was them, I would want to secure whatever product, you know, that is going into Africa, was coming out of Africa.
You're right.
You know? So that would be from a business sense, you know. So I would think about it from a business perspective first before I can choose the solution to be able to implement, you know. And I think that's pretty much where it is right now, right? Because if it's not making business sense, why would you spend the money to be able to do this exercise? So in that way, you mentioned supply chain management, and that's an area where, you know, one can be able to effectively make an impact, because you've got all these big organizations from, you know, Western and Eastern East Asia, you know, that typically want to know what their supply chain look like. There's laws in Europe and the US that reinforce this, right? It's almost like know your customer that the banks had to do, where now they're looking at manufacturers, end product manufacturers that produce things like a cell phone. They're saying to them, look, you know, we're going to put the laws in place for you to know exactly what's coming into your supply chain, because we don't like the not just the story, just like the story associated to the brand that is coming out of areas that you are dealing in. You know, So that becomes important, right?
Such as child labor.
Such as child labor, you know. I think that sort of push is coming from the consumer, from the European and US market. You know, the consumers want to know where their product come from. They want to know who you've bought your minerals from. They want to know whether child labor or forced labor was utilized before they get their cell phone.
So would you say that it's sort of one of the solutions or use cases could be to bring back ethics into some place where ethics has started falling way off?
Yeah. Okay, that's a very interesting point. Yeah. And I would term it this way, right? So what I see blockchain trying to do is to change behavior. And that behavior is being changed to run trust, right? So what you want is for different individuals who participate in this project to be able to follow a certain degree or a certain behavior when it comes to doing business, right? So we're moving from dealing with somebody that you don't trust into a behavior governed by a solution or by a technology that brings trust together. So when you think about it that way, and you sit and you think, well, is this something that we can utilize in Africa? Is this important to us? Is trust integral to where we want to go? Right? And I think that's where, once we start answering those sort of questions, just on a simplistic level, not even a tech level, just if we get the ordinary person to understand that the technology is integral to bringing trust in a group of people or a group of organizations, I think that will be a key element to what we can solve.
Right. Or we're saying, we're shoving it down your throat. We've given you so much of our trust, and you've abused it over the years. We've entrusted you with everything. And slowly and surely, that trust has denigrated over the years so much that you've created a massive collapse of markets. You've created high inflation in various countries. You've fed into the poverty of certain countries. You've almost totally colonized some cultures, and now we want that back. So we are retaliating, and that retaliation is in the form of a system that is decentralized, power back to the people, and you now are going to have to join forces with us, taking this to the next level. The reason I say join forces is that if you go into the blockchain technology, is that you're still going to be operating with fiat, which is a product of the centralized nature, which means that we still have a dependency on the big powers that took away the power from us. So I would have to be freed by my oppressor to see freedom. Which is a complex thing.
It is. But I don't think that we can totally do away with the regulators.
Absolutely
right?
not.
I think they have a critical role to play within the development of where we want to see ourselves. And that should be also factored in when we think of where we want to go with a decentralized system. There's certain elements that we're never going to get away from. We're never going to get away from. And we need to learn to play within those boundaries, right? Not moving away from how important the blockchain technologies and its benefits can be. But we also need to understand that there are rules that we all have to play by. Sometimes some people have abused it, like banks to 2008. What's the word? The recession.
The recession
that was created
in
by
the US.
By the banks in the US and so on. But one needs to understand that regulators also have their part to play.
Yeah,
you know.
I think it's also a good reset. You are reteaching the powers that be that this is not on. Who really holds the power? The people hold the power.
Yeah.
But if you have heavily centralized systems that start tampering, because centralization is not a bad thing if there's ethics involved, right? So the reason that you end up with decentralization is because we gave you our trust and you abused it. Therefore, we want to take our items back from you. Which is our money, which is how we do things, which is how we input information into systems and so on and so forth. So I think that it's sort of like a symbiotic thing. So if you got a mass adoption of the new tech, then the powers that be will follow suit. And hopefully, and that is only hopefully, they will then create products that are going to meet us somewhere in the middle in the decentralization path that are ethical and have morals enough so that we can all be in a comfortable place. And that's bringing in the supply chain management, the finances, the medical space, the educational space, all of these spaces that are critical to coexistence in human life. So I'm thinking that blockchain, if it's adopted and adopted well, could be just a bit of the solution in this path that we're following.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think we need to look at where we can get our first wins, right? I don't think that governments are typically going to be your first adopters. No. But from a private perspective, we can get a couple of really good wins,
Right.
On the back of some of the industries that you just mentioned, right? Because they are critical. So supply chain management, blockchain can play a really valuable and integral part in that space. Identity space. We can do a lot in that space as well. When we sit and we look at real estate, we can do quite a lot in that space as well. So we can go on and just identify different areas where we can actually make an impact to the everyday man that will create that massive adoption, right? But it needs to make sense to the everyday man. They need to be able to see and understand the value that comes from utilizing a product that is powered by this underlying technology. Because the everyday man doesn't really care about the blockchain system and how great it is. They care about the result, right? They care about the solution, what happens at the end. You know, an example is like not everybody who drives a BMW knows exactly what that engine can do. Right? But if you look in South Africa, the mass adoption of the BMW brand, is amazing.
And they influence that power.
And exactly.
So how does the everyday man influence the power that could possibly be the solution, which is blockchain? What kind of area could they go into to influence that movement, which is within the blockchain?
Okay, I think when we talk about the everyday man, we need to understand how important the entrepreneur, the guys that we're talking to in this podcast and the guys that want to learn more about the technology, they become an important part of how the everyday man experiences this technology, right? So for me, that's the person who's going to impact the everyday man the most, right? So the tech entrepreneur and what they doing, right? And it comes back to real life solutions, right? What problems are we seeing within our community and within Africa that we want to change utilizing blockchain technology? But also it has to make business sense.
Absolutely.
Right? The end user has to be able to afford, right, whatever we're trying to build.
Right.
There's no point in us just saying, well, blockchain technology can do this, but the end user cannot afford it.
Yeah.
So we need to be business minded, but also we need to be tech savvy enough to bring that balance, and then we can make the change.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's such a wide subject, and I think that we're going to be talking about it more often. We're also going to be meeting some devs that are building solutions, your AR, your gaming solutions, supply management solutions, which hopefully will be adopted by corporates. So I think that one of the big things for telcos especially, or the tech companies, is to start believing and intentionally investing in entrepreneurs that are bringing solutions within the space. It can only benefit the continent. It can only benefit the businesses that are involved in this. So I'm excited about where this thing is going. I'm excited about the tech organizations that are actually going in and investing. I will name a few in the next episodes, but we are very excited because they are the pioneers and they are the ones that are really going to charter this path for us within the space and create opportunities, create employment, gainful employment within the space. But it's also, to an extent, some of these things have got to be made in Africa. Because by the time we are purchasing these things, they are really, really inflated and overpriced, and that so much that it becomes very expensive for the end user.
I agree. I agree. I think Africa has a place to play in the overall ecosystem. And I think we have to be brave enough. We have to be brave enough to try. You know, I think what is happening from your partners that you might mention in a couple of episodes, and maybe others, they have to be able to risk. They have to be able and willing to take the risk, to see that improvement, to see these new technologies built here. Because if you look at any areas where you saw or you see startups developing, whether you look at America, you look at Europe, Asia, they all did a couple of things right. And first and foremost, it was they decided that we're going to invest in this place. We're going to invest in entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And I don't believe that the initial investments from, let's say, the guys that started way back, the Paul Grahams of this world, it was just about, profits. It was exploring. You've got to explore first. Right?
Yes.
Is this probable? Is it doable? Then from there, you say, well, we've learned a couple of things, so let's push beyond these boundaries, right? Let's put more and more money in it. But we cannot get to the level where we compete on a global space when we're looking for return on investment from the word go.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
We're just never going to get there.
Yes.
Because then why should I spend my time as an entrepreneur to try and build something when I know that, I might not get the return on investment as an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's understanding where we are as a continent and as a people, and being able to risk and do what is necessary to get us there.
Absolutely.
It's going to take some innovators.
And risk-taking and patience. So in our next episode, we're going to be speaking with some tech entrepreneurs. We're also going to be discussing all the opportunities that exist, some that are already in the continent and some that are threatening to come into the continent, which are all techie opportunities that you as an entrepreneur, you as an inspired enthusiast can possibly venture into. Shabs, it's been such a beautiful moment chatting with you. It's always amazing talking to you about emerging technology. We're looking forward to many more conversations on Learn Crypto Africa, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate. Hopefully this is not the last time that we do interact and talk about this. I would love to come back, and all the best on your new venture. I love this. This is amazing.
Thank you so much. So look out for Learn Crypto Africa. Next series, we're talking about entrepreneurship in the blockchain space. Thank you.
What is cryptocurrency? Allow me to please sit down. What is cryptocurrency? It's literally just money. It's digital money. It's a digital asset. So what is our relationship with money? To bridge a poverty divide, you do not give people money. You cannot give people money to eradicate poverty. You need to give people access. Access. Okay? And that's what decentralization does. It allows for access. If you tell me you're poor today, and I gave you $100, even if I gave you $1 million each, it's not going to eradicate your poverty. But what are you going to do with that money? You're going to either go and buy a fancy car, you're going to go and spend it, you're going to go and buy Louis Vuitton. Money does not bridge the poverty divide. Access does. And that's what information did. It started to tip into bridging that divide of information. What is the only thing that liberates people? Knowledge.